Hi, everyone. Welcome and thanks for attending. I'm Scott at Chief Architect, and I'm here today to share new addition remodeling tips with respect to framing and materials list. As we are live here today, I would like to encourage you to ask questions. You can do that during this prepared remarks through the chat session. You can also raise your hand and we'll unmute your mic at the end of the presentation. You'll find these settings in your GoToWebinar control panel. The session will be recorded and we'll send you a link out along with a survey request at the end of the presentation. You may notice my occasional assistant. This is Maya. Also, we have Chief Architect staff available today to answer your questions and to keep an eye on me. I've had a little over 750 people sign up today, so bear with us as we get through your questions. So let's get started. Let me switch around here and share my Chief Architect screen.
In this remodeling seminar, I'm going to create the new addition framing for the floor, walls, and roof. I'll color code the materials to make the process easy to visualize for the new construction. I'll show you how to create new construction wall types that are color coded for both 3D and 2D. I'll briefly discuss using an as-built overlay to superimpose over the remodel project. Then we'll look at the process to create a materials takeoff for the new addition space. You can complete these same steps using our Chief Challenge plan. You can download this plan from our user forum, Chief Talk. I would encourage you to follow the steps to help in your learning, and then you can post your results using the hashtag Chief Challenge on social media. Let's get started. For this seminar, I've opened up one of our sample projects, the Bachelor View Master Wing remodel. You can see the expanded area in the blue highlight that I have off to the left-hand side. If I toggle on the reference display of the as-built using the F9 function key on my keyboard, you can see the previous demo condition that we removed out of the project. In the 3D view, if we move over and take a look at this, you can see the plan. I've already color coded the walls in 3D. Again, F9 on the keyboard to superimpose the as-built plan. I color coded the demo walls that were removed out of the plan. You can toggle that on, toggle it off. If you'd like to learn more about that as-built process, you can watch the live webinar video that we did on that. If you take a look at the full overview of the project, this is what it looks like, what we're going to be doing. The pop-out we're going to create that's already been drawn with the walls. We're going to focus on the framing, and the framing view that I've opened up, if we rotate and take a look at this kind of off to the side here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and create the framing for the new addition, and as we do that, we'll talk about how you can create framing for the floor platform, the walls, and the roof, and then we're going to take a look at the materials takeoff. You'll notice the framing already exists for the as-built project. When I began the process, I drew the initial plan, framed it, and then in this new remodel plan, I have not updated any of the framing. I want to go through the process, and I'm going to begin with the floor platform framing down in here. And this may be easy to do if I tile my screen for you. In Chief Architect, when you create your floor framing, it's built on the floor below. In this case, the floor below would be our foundation, floor 0. I'm going to take my floor plan view and let's switch this to a floor framing view. And let's take a look at our existing condition that we have for our floor framing. And this moved us, when we did this, moved us down to the foundation level. You can see my indicator here is moved down to floor 0. And as you see in the 3D view and the 2D view, there is no framing that exists for this. When we created the remodel project, I did no updating of the framing. And I'm going to begin the process by taking a look at updating the floor framing. There's a couple of ways you can do this. If you have existing as-built framing and you want to tie into that so you can show the details, I'm going to go through that process. And in my existing floor framing, you can see I have a floor joist indicator that has forced the joists to go in the long direction of this floor plan. And when we build the floor joists on the new addition, we want to make sure that it goes the opposite way. And it probably will because I don't have a floor joist indicator that's going in the up and down direction. To create framing just for one room, you're going to find that option inside the program. To do that, the rooms are defined on the floor above, the first floor. where we have the closet and the new addition of the master bath and the new addition for the shower. When you click inside of a room, in this case the bottom left-hand corner, which would be the closet, there is a tool down here that is specific to build the framing just for that selected object, in this case the floor platform. Let's go through and build the floor platform framing for this, and the program at this point is going to give you an indicator question that said it would like to extend it into adjacent rooms, or really, would you like to create a new framing group for the selected room? When we do this, it's going to just do the framing in that area. If we just double click and open up that room, let's take a look and see what happened in this case when we said yes to create a framing group. On the structure panel, what's happened here, down in the floor category on the structure panel, there is an area here for framing group. Initially that was set to 1, which is a default, and when I said yes, it incremented that by 1 so that it treats the framing different, similar to framing in a remodeling condition. Let's go ahead and do that one more time. Let me press the undo button here once. I'm going to go ahead and group select all 3 of the new addition rooms. I'm going to hold my shift key down. Use the same tool that says build framing for the selected object. Again, it's going to give you the same message question about would you like to create a new framing group. If you say yes, what's happened in this case, again, is it changed that framing group to increment it by 1. If we just move over into the other room, you're going to notice in the dialog down here that the framing group is 1, and when they are on different numbers, it will treat those framing components differently. Press undo one more time here. The final way to create your floor framing is actually to do this through the Build Framing menu. When you build your framing through the menu system, there's a couple of things you should be aware of. One is you want to make sure the framing group for the new rooms is incremented above your existing framing. I shift selected all 3 of those rooms. On the structure panel, I'm going to increment that at least by 1. They are now on a separate level. The other thing, if you want to retain your existing framing, make sure that the other rooms, and I'm just going to select one of these, but make sure all of the rooms are selected. And what you want to do is you want to make sure that you've marked the retain floor framing for that area, because when you go through and rebuild the framing, it wants to replace everything. And those elements you want to remain, make sure that you check the retain floor framing option. Now I have color coded my framing to be a different color, and when you take a look at my materials inside of this room, let's go in and take a look at the structure, specifically down in the floor structure area. I'm going to click the edit tool. In the floor structure definition, the top layer is set up to be an OSB, and then the next layer is set up to be fur framing, 14-inch I-joist. On the material, if you click on the texture, inside of the Plan Materials dialog, you're going to see that I have a new fur framing material. I'll just click the Edit button, and you can see that I've selected a green material. How did I do that? Well, typically when you're going to be framing, the material might be made out of a fur framing. What I typically will do is I like to color code my framing, create a copy of it, give it a name. In this case, I'm just going to call it New 2. On the material color, what I've done is I've gone in and color coded it to be a specific green color. Let's go ahead and just choose that, maybe knock it down a little bit. On the texture panel, I'll check the option to blend with texture. And that's how I've gone through the process to create a new framing material that is green in that case. And now when I create my framing for that platform, it will actually color code it using this green material. With the material adjusted and the framing group changed to a higher number, when I go through the process and building the framing, let's just move down to the floor below where that framing will occur on the foundation. Underneath the Build menu, I'm going to come down to Framing, Build Framing, and then underneath the foundation, move down to Build the subfloor for the first floor. Let's go ahead and check that, update the framing, and now you can see that it's updated. If we maximize our 3D view, you may need to make a little bit of cleanup. You'll notice that it doubled the joists in some cases. Underneath a couple of the walls, that was a shower wall that's above that, and then our closet wall, then you can make any manual adjustments that you need to with respect to the framing. Let's move on and take a look at the wall framing. Again, back into the floor plan view. For these specific walls on floor 1, you'll notice that I've color coded the new walls to be green in the floor plan view. And I want to go through the process and frame these. Let me just click and hold the Shift key down. I'm going to grab all of the walls that need to be framed. Just like the floor platforms, you're going to find an individual framing component down in the lower edit menu. And in this case, I can build the framing for those selected objects. Let's go ahead and press that tool. You can see the studs appear in the 2D view as well as the header information that has that on for that layer. And then back in the 3D view, you can see that I've also color coded the framing for the walls. That color coding also applies in the 2D view. Let's move up into the attic and frame the upper attic wall. Move up a level from the plan view. Click on the wall. Click on Build Framing for Individual Component. And you can see the gable wall is then framed. Let's take a look at the process for creating a new construction wall type. Underneath your Build menu, underneath the walls, you're going to find your Define Wall Types menu item. My default wall type for my exterior was the siding plank wall type, and you can see underneath of here it's just using the typical 16-inch stud that has the fur material similar to the floor platform. What I've done in here is I've created a copy of that wall, and if you take a look at the copy that I've created, the only thing that changed was using that material called the new fur framing. The exact same process that I did for the floor framing. And that's how you can create this visually different looking material for your framing aspects. You may notice that I've used a darker material for any bearing beams or maybe an I-beam that's going through the design so that it shows up a little bit darker. Also my roof material, a little bit darker material. I like to be able to show that visually when you're looking at it. Makes it more clear which framing materials are being used. The other thing that I've done with my wall is in the 2D view I've also changed it to be green. This is what shows up in your plan view. So green in the 3D view, green in the 2D view, and then when you're looking at it in either view, you can see the green in the 2D view, you can see the green in the 3D view, and it helps to make it visually different when you're creating your new addition framing. Let me move on and take a look at the roof framing. I'm going to switch my Save Plan view. I've created a view specifically for the roof framing. We'll come over, change the framing view. In the 2D view, you see the two roof planes. I'm going to hold my Shift key down. I'm going to click on the first one, grab the second one, and just like the walls and the floor platform, you're going to see a tool down in the lower edit menu to build the framing for that selected object, and then you can see it appear in the 3D view. You may need to make some modifications to the framing. I may pull this framing member back. Any other manual editing that you need to do on the framing. Now you're going to notice that one of the things in this view, I'm seeing the windows in this frame view while I'm not seeing them in the new framed view. For the green framing, let's go in, turn a layer on. I created a specific window layer, and I'm just going to do a search for windows. I created a specific remodel window layer that I can turn those on and off. That's just a layer that you can toggle. That way it made it easy to demo that and show the difference between the addition and the existing as-built. I just separated those two layers. In this last segment of the seminar, let's talk about creating a materials list for this new addition. Underneath the Tools menu, you're going to find an option for the materials list, which you can calculate by floor, by room, by area, or a materials list polyline. To create the materials list polyline, I want to do this from the plan view, and I want to be very specific for the new addition. In the plan view, I'm going to start out by drawing a CAD box, and I'm going to make sure that the particular layers, in this case the roof, is turned on so I know exactly where to draw this materials list polyline. And then I'm just going to come over here and snap it approximately to the center of the wall. May be difficult to see on your screen, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually take that polyline, I'm going to convert that. You'll notice a little magic wand icon that says Convert Polyline, and I'm going to convert that underneath the other category to a materials list polyline. And then one of the things that I do like to do is I like to turn that from, you'll notice that my plan, my default CAD layer is coming in on CAD framing. I do like to be specific with this. I'm just going to click the option down here for Define. I'm going to come over and I'm going to change that to the materials list polyline. So I'll just make a copy of the CAD framing and I'm just going to call it materials list. At this point, the program is going to ask you what you would like to include for the materials list polyline. You can come down, you can remove particular categories out of here as you need to. The other thing you can do is you can include all floors. We do have a foundation in here. I do have an attic. If I had a second floor, it would go through and include all of those different levels in the materials list. And again, if you want to come in and make adjustments to remove categories from the materials list, you can do that. At the bottom of the dialog, the materials list polyline can include intersected objects, contained in objects, or objects by center. In this case, I'm just going to be using include contained objects. The other thing is, to make this stand out a little bit, I may just put a slight fill style in here. I'm going to come down, choose that it's solid, and then we'll just change this to be maybe a very light color in here. And I'm just going to put a slight orange on there and maybe make that somewhat transparent. I'll just adjust it to 50%. Once the materials list polyline is created, select it. In your lower edit menu is the option now to calculate materials from the polyline. This will generate the spreadsheet-like format of all of the categories that we specified in that materials list by area through all floors. There is an option to edit the active view. Let's go ahead and take a look at what that means. Inside of the materials list view, we can actually override the materials list polyline that we created, and you can actually come in here. Perhaps you want to clear all. We'll come down and just choose the subfloor for the framing materials. You'll notice also there is the option to include columns and also to restrict it to a particular floor. We'll go ahead and leave that and just look for the subfloor. At this point, it will isolate your materials just to that subsection within that view. Using this edit view, you can come in and be very specific for the categories that you're going to choose. And I'm going to go ahead and reset that to all and generate your materials list for your new addition that can be specific using the materials list polyline. In the materials list, you'll find a drop down for how the materials list specifically with framing is calculated. You can change it to the cut, buy, and mixed reporting list. If I switch this to the cut list and you look at what happens to the framing category, it dramatically expands. If I switch this to the buy list and we make the adjustment, come down into framing, you can see that it also adjusts accordingly. Now, inside of the framing components, if I come down to this 2x6 stud, I put in a price of $5 for the stud. With the 8 studs, that makes that a total of $40. You can go in and push that up to a master list. You'll see this update to master. And then when you run a new materials list, there is a tool down here that you can say update from master. So you can have many things, commodity items, whatever it is, in your master materials list, and then use this update from master. Let's take a look at this line item where we have several 2x6s that are 10 foot. And if I expand this category on the line item F10, you're going to see a number of wall items in here. One of the things you can do, if I click on one of these elements, there is an option in the lower left-hand corner that will show Find Object in Plan. This will open up the particular object, and it's highlighted right now, a little bit difficult to see, but it's that last stud on the end of this wall detail. Being able to find objects through the materials list can be a helpful element to identify where some particular studs or items are in the materials list, and you're going to find that just by clicking on a particular element and using the Find in Plan option. Items in your materials list can be managed through your structural member reporting. You'll find this underneath the Tools menu, underneath Materials List, and it's called Structure Member Reporting. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on here, but when you switch this over to the Buy list in this case, our recommendation is to click Consolidated Unhandled Boards, and that will help you assemble wall plates, deck planking, and rim joists. And the default lumber list that we ship with the program is included. There is a lot in there. You may decide that you want to trim it out, and then you can come in here and you can manage or remove items and also increase or decrease priority of those elements. So if you find the commodity prices are changing and there's a better buy on a 12 foot, you could simply come in here and increase that in priority above the 10 footer and that will help manage your materials list. If it's important to you, you want to go in here and make sure you trim this out and remove or change the priority of these elements. You can manage your master list underneath the Tools menu, come down to Master List, and then you can manage any of the items in your master list. Other thing you can do with your materials list is you can export this. You'll find a tool down here that says Export Materials List, and there's a number of file formats you can export it to, as well as some options, and also exporting it to third-party formats. Press Export, and you have access to that materials in these exported formats. To practice these steps in the video, we have posted a Chief Challenge file that you can repeat these same steps and then post your example on social media using the hashtag Chief Challenge.
And so that kind of wraps up the prepared remarks that I have. And as I get ready to hand this over to Carrie, I just want to make sure that I do make you aware of what's going on for the upcoming seminars, and also make you aware of some of the resources that we do have available. So these free webinars have been going on Thursdays. We're going to talk about all about master baths in the month of August, and I'll talk about what's coming next week. We do have virtual training seminars. These are full classes. We've broken them up into 4-hour segments across 4 days. The next one is the first part of September. We do on-demand classes. If you want to watch those classes in the convenience and just press a video, then you can do that. One-on-one training, super effective, where we can screen share with you our videos, our how-to articles, and Chief Talk, which is the community of you all, is a really great resource. I'm always amazed at people posting out there and how quickly they get answers. Again, next week, we're going to be doing specifically the master bath floor planning. We're going to import a plan image. We're going to talk about tracing over it and how to effectively dimension it. So with that, I'm going to ask Carrie to facilitate questions. If you have a question, make sure that you raise your hand. Carrie's going to peek out there, and we're going to try to make the questions relevant to the framing, materials list, and how it can work for new additions. So with that, Carrie, do we have any questions out there?
Hey Scott, we do have some questions. We have Norman James here. Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hey Scott, good afternoon. How are you? Hey, 2 questions. The one is on the materials list. I noticed you add that $12 for the unit of that stud.
Sure.
If we wanted to generate the master list, obviously all my rates are in meter rates, and I wanted to put a meter rate in. So how would you do that, so that obviously if I go through and do my buy list, it'll tell me how many meters of, you say 2x4 and we actually say 4x2.
They're much more accurate, yeah.
Yeah, so just how you'd actually change that, so you're working on a meter rate. So that's my first question.
Okay.
And then the second question was just calculating around the insulation. Obviously our wall, floor and ceiling insulation are different, but how I can change that, because I've noticed in the material it kind of gives you a unit based on what I'd say is a pad size as opposed to a square meter rate.
Yeah. Well, let's kind of take your first question here, is how would you calculate the minor and imperial dimensions here? When I began my plan here, Norman, I used the imperial plan template, and you're seeing the results of using the imperial measurements. We do support having a metric plan template, and when you're using that, you can access your units in metric. Also, you can control that if we just kind of switch back here and go into our structural member reporting that you'll find underneath materials list. When you look at your structural member reporting, and I switch this maybe to a buy list, and by the way, I think the recommendation, if you're going to use this buy list option, is to consolidate the unhandled boards and then combine wall plates, deck planking, and rim joists. So what you can do down here is you can be very specific and add anything you want in here. So this is this is using Imperial, and if you wanted to use the metric, you could go in there, and if it doesn't exist, there's a new button down here. You can click new, you can adjust that material, and if I just were to subtract maybe minus 48 inches on here, I now have a specific lumber size that I can put in there that would be, it's probably duplicated, but you can easily add those in there and then generate your materials list.
Yep, so I'm obviously operating on the metric system, which works fine, but it was just instead of having like a unit, that $12, was that a meter rate that you had on your?
Oh, in that case, I arbitrarily put in $12, and that was for one 16-foot length board that you would pay, and that's why it calculated it out. I just arbitrarily put that in there.
Yeah. So instead of going like a 16-foot, say you had a price per foot. So when you put that in your master list, obviously it just, instead of going through and saying, well, you know, to us, we still buy stuff in multiples of 300 millimeters, so it'll be a 4.8 or whatever it is. But instead of just going 4.8 length is X amount, I've got a rate of $7.50 a meter.
Sure. And in that case, I switched it to lineal length in my drop down.
Yep.
And then I changed the pricing to, in this case, $1.30 a foot. And then that gives you what your total would be. So it'd be the same if it were per meter. So you can do that if you switch it to lineal length.
Okay, that's what I was looking for, was that lineal length.
Yeah.
All right, awesome.
And then I think as far as insulation, we are not giving you the breakout of that, I believe. Let's just scroll down here. Yeah, we're giving you the information down here, and then we're in lineal length, which I guess works as far as the materials that we have for the insulation. And you know, I think the easiest thing to do when you're calculating one of these is just build something like a 10 square meter structure and determine how close this is. There's an extra column in here. So if you need to put a little extra in there, then you can use that calculation for those walls, ceilings, or floors.
Okay, so if you're adding like 5% or something like that.
Yep. Yeah, and you can put formulas in here as well.
Oh, okay, awesome.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Norman, for calling in. Carrie?
Thanks so much.
Thanks, Scott. We had Elliot write in a question. He doesn't have a mic, so I'll just read it to you. Can you show us how to change the ridge beam to a 4x12 or maybe a 4x12 on the plate and hang the roof joists on the back of the header?
Maybe. Let's see what we've got here. Okay. So just to kind of make this quick, let me switch over to my vector view so it might be a little easier to see. And let's assume that we wanted to make a change in one of these elements. And I'll just pick on the beam that we have this ridge rafter in here. And if you want to open that up just by double clicking on it, you can see what it is. It's a 2x12 effectively. And if we wanted to increase that, make it a 4x12, let's put in 3.5 inches. Well, let's make the change. Of course, then I'd probably want to trim the other roof rafters out and then make the adjustment. And if you kind of define your framing in advance, it will do that for you, and you don't have to do much manual work.
We have a question from Fred Aranda. Go ahead and ask your question, Fred.
Yes, good afternoon.
Hi, Fred.
First of all, let me tell you, I'm really impressed with what this program does. I'm a general contractor, and I do the architectural drawings, but to be able to do this and get a materials list is great. I got two questions I can think of offhand. The first one is, how do I view this? I understood that you record it, and I can go back and look at it. Is it possible to look at not only this, but previous webinars that you've done?
Yeah, if I pull open the website over here, let me just open this up. And from the website, you come underneath of our user center down to training videos. On the far left-hand side over here, down at the very bottom on the far left-hand side are the recorded live stream webinars. When you then filter that, you're going to see the live webinars that we've been doing since our virus crisis has kind of hit us. And when you click on that list, you can kind of see what's been going on. And we kind of focused on remodeling for the month of July. And all of these videos you can just watch at your convenience. And we'll be posting this one sometime in the next day or so.
Okay. Now, I'm a previous AutoCAD user.
Okay.
This is amazing to see the support that I can get with Chief Architect. It totally, it blows me out of the water. I just can't believe it. Okay. My second question is, I do the estimating. Now I have a separate program for estimating.
Okay.
It looks like you pretty much do the estimating here. All I've got to do is figure out maybe unloading, stocking the job, those kind of details that aren't with actually putting the material together.
Mm-hmm.
And I could do that, but with the extra and just put in, I guess, what I assume it's going to cost.
Right. There are a number of columns in here if we came in here, and you can do a percent markup, labor, equipment. These are all things that I kind of have turned off. Accounting code. So all of these elements you can put in there. As far as the options go, you can restrict it by floor, and then the categories, which I have everything turned on. When I change and add those additional items, let's see if we can close this other view over here. You now have access to the other columns: price, markup, labor, equipment, and then that will calculate your total cost. And if we put in, let's go in and say this stone that we have in here, maybe put in a price. We'll just use round numbers here. Don't hold me to these because I won't be able to do it. And then we said 10% markup. And then the labor, gosh, what's it going to cost us? 125.
And that's for the units per square foot?
Yeah, you can see typically what the units are when you put it in there.
Okay.
And then, you get the calculation in here. And if you want to push it out to Excel or another program, these are the options you have: common delimited file, Excel format, and then you have access to it and you can kind of monitor it. It's kind of nice because if you had a concrete foundation and you decided, well, I need to move this wall out 4 feet, real quickly you could understand, well, how much more concrete are we talking about? And if concrete's 150 bucks a unit, then you have a number quickly. So
I need to turn back in my estimating program.
Well, I don't. Yeah, I'm not here to advertise that, but
no.
We certainly appreciate you turning in your AutoCAD file. So, well, welcome to Chief.
Thank you.
Scott, we have a question from Wesley. Hi, Wesley. Go ahead and ask your question.
Hey, I'm also a contractor, and I too am blown away by this. But I had a question on, like, for instance, on the insulation, it has 48-inch bats. Is there a way to change the materials that you don't see in the 3D? Like if you wanted to use roll insulation?
Yeah, so that's a good question. Chris, are you out there? Could weigh in if there's a way to change the insulation from bats to rolls.
Yeah, I'm here. There are ways to accomplish that. The best way to do it is to work it out based on some kind of a formula. Excuse me. You can type in a size and change your size from saying bats to, you can just call it a 6x16 roll, or just 6x16, and then you can set it up to calculate linear feet. And you would just do that by using a formula. You notice you've got the 32 feet or 32 bats that's already in there for the wall insulation there on that first entry. That number, if we edit that field, you'll see that it says in there, I believe, automatic count. So that automatic count being the number of bats, the length of the bat, so you can multiply that by the length of the bat and get the total linear length of insulation. And if you notice, once you do that, so let's see, what's the length in this case? Is it the 93 inches?
Right.
Yeah, so you can multiply that by 93 inches, and then probably divide by 12 to get it into feet. And once you do that, that little box that's just to the right of that formula will open up, and you can tell it that you want it to display that in feet, and then you can set a price per foot.
Okay.
And Chris, where's a good place to learn more about writing formulas in the materials list?
That is let's see. I don't necessarily have a direct answer for that, but I know we've got some of that in our help file, and I think we have probably some other articles. And I know that there are lots of folks in Chief Talk that they're posting on our forums that have spent a lot of time with this kind of thing and have grown to be experts. So honestly, I would argue that those folks are probably even greater experts than sometimes we in-house are for coming up with some of these creative formulas.
Okay, thanks a lot, Chris. So Wesley, make sure that you take a look at putting a formula in here if you wanted to go in and do something specific. You'll find macros available to you in here so that you can use different components if it helps you in creating those. And then, as Chris had suggested, besides our help file, Chief Talk's a great resource.
Scott?
Thanks for calling in.
Thanks, Scott.
Scott, can I get in here for a second?
Yeah, Al.
Could you scroll up, please?
Okay, where do you want
very
to go?
top? Very top.
Sure.
All right. So we've got wall types by lineal foot up here, and a lot of times you can use how many lineal feet of wall you have to determine the square footage for insulation or plywood or anything else. Okay. If you know how many square feet you have in a roll, you can just do a simple division and come up with the number of rolls based on the wall types you have. How many lineal feet of wall? So that's another way to get it done.
Okay, great. Thanks for sharing, Al.
Scott, we have a question from Gonzalo Montano. Go ahead and ask your question.
I've been working on a plan for a room addition, something similar to what you have there. I'm new to Chief Architect. I started with Chief Home something, and then I went up to Pro, and then I got the X12. So I'm really enjoying it. I started the drawing incorrectly, meaning I started the drawing as a new construction when I should have selected the remodeling part. So right now, I'm finishing the drawing as a new construction. I'm having a hard time finding a way to edit the roof planes of the existing house and adding the new roof plane to the room addition. So I have the actual like a aerial image of the actual roof planes. I've been having a hard time adding them onto the plan.
Okay. Well, Gonzalo, one of the things we do is we do one-on-one training, and we could do screen sharing for you. But roughly, if I were to switch this back over from this framing view to the standard view that has the exterior on here, and let's suppose that you want to manually edit these roof planes, and if I just delete these or move these around, you can pull these around and adjust them in any way that you want. You can also build a new roof plane and lock the other roof plane. So if you have an as-built condition, let's suppose that I don't have any roof planes over here, and we just kind of delete them, right? And that gets rid of that gable wall. These roof planes can be, locked basically, so that they don't, if we open them up and just kind of check, right now, these are marked as edited, so we know that they have been touched. And if you went into your build menu and came down to the roof and we're looking at building your roof, what I can do is build the roof planes and then make sure that this mark is checked to retain the edited roof planes, or if you manually drew any, you could generate those. And I'm not sure what's going to happen because I haven't tried this yet, but in theory, that should generate just those new roof planes. And it looks like wasn't quite what we were after. So I'm just going to grab this one because it missed the other side. Copy, reflect, and if I did that right, pull that in there, and I need to do a little bit of editing and pull that back so that it's not competing with it. And here we are back with just that new addition. So there's a whole seminar on roofs, and if you're having issues or would like to get any help with it, you could post on Chief Talk, or you could refer back to our one-on-one training system, and we can kind of open up your project and work with you on it.
Yeah, so what my plan is I'm gonna figure out the roof plane part, and then I'm gonna file save, and then I'm gonna start a new one with that template as a remodel, because I have like the main house right now, because I didn't have like the whole drawings of the whole entire house. So I had to pretty much start it from scratch, from manual measurements in the house to drawing it on Chief Architect. So now I'm gonna finish that, set it as default, and then I'm gonna go back to new project, and I'm gonna open it as a remodeling project in order for me to add the square footage for the remodeling project phase of it.
Perfect.
Yeah, and also one more question for does the chief architect have an option for engineering measurements, or does the software automatically measure engineering reports? Or, because it would save a lot of money to the chief architect designer if it was built in the software where a wall would generate heat capacity or in engineering measurements or calculations, you know what I mean, on a different dashboard, kind of like the materials list breaking down like that. That would be amazing.
So the answer is, you can see this set of drawings is stamped with engineering. The answer is Chief Architect doesn't do any structural calculations for you. And you're going to need to make sure there's a lot of different environments, whether you have snow in where we live or you have wind in the south, or different conditions require specific engineering, and you just need to refer to a structural engineer. We don't do any of the calculations when you generate the framing in the program. So be sure that you're using, those people that are familiar and know how to do those calculations for you.
Yeah, it would be super if like if architect would bring like like two capacity, or engineers that are able to generate that type of information into the software, where would just be just needing a write-off of an engineer, pretty much like like homework check. They would just check the homework and stamp it. It would be a lot more affordable. And then
that would be nice. Thanks a lot for calling in today. And Carrie, who do we have next?
We have a question from Ken Hurd. Go ahead, Ken.
Hi, Scott. I'd like to go back to the insulation. Is there a way to select what kind of insulation one would like open cell, closed cell foam, cellulose, or is it all assumed to be fiberglass?
Yeah, I don't know that we're going to give you the detail on the insulation, but you could easily come down, where is that insulation? And if we modify and make sure that we add the column in here for comments, or there's the comment field. So let's just slide over a little bit. And what you could do in that case, let's just come over here and, you could call it full cell or whatever you need to do in that column. That's probably one thing you could do. Al, is there anything you might add to that?
There might be a way to get this into a components area in the wall.
That's what I'd like to see.
Yeah. Yeah, if you open a wall specification dialog box, there's components in the wall that you can put in, and there's also object information. So you might be able to do something there. You can, in the components area, you have the main wall part, you've got siding and things like this. And you can also add an accessory that could be the closed-celled insulation. But it's in the wall specification under components. You can add anything you want.
So it would not be in the wall definition dialogue.
Well, I'm in the. I just drew a wall, clicked on it. I think you might be able to put that into the definition as well.
Because I didn't see it there.
Here we go. I found the wall insulation.
Yeah, it's under
And
components.
so, yeah, so underneath the description here, let's just change it, and wall insulation, let's call it full self or whatever. And then here's the calculation. We were talking about the calculation. Here's the formula in the wall itself. So if you wanted to make this change in all walls, we were talking about changing the calculation. Here's the formula right here, and you could save that in your wall type. And now if we do a materials list just for that wall, see the wall selected, and I'm going to calculate the materials just for that wall, you can see that it's showing up underneath insulation with that description in there.
But it still shows bats.
Yeah, I don't know if I can control that. Let's see if we can open up that wall and see if that's actually in there. Let's come back down here.
Yes, undersized.
Yeah. Okay, so
can that be changed?
There you go. And then again, you could do the formula in there to figure out what it needs to be, and then we'll rerun that calculation, and it should get rid of the word bats. It says roll.
And if it's blown in insulation or any, the foam.
You could have put anything in there.
Yeah, whatever you want to type in there. I think you should be able to add that in and have it be more descriptive than what we ship with as a default.
So in other words, it would calculate the volume, not just the lineal foot or
well, you would have to put the formula in there, because if you look at the overall materials list and we look at that wall, you're getting how many lineal feet of a particular wall. So I'd probably need to do a test case and make sure if you had a 10-foot wall and it's 10-foot length, 10-foot high, so you have 100 square feet, you just want to make sure that you check that calculation, verify that you have the right formula. I think you should be able to do it, though.
Well, that's a way forward. Thank you.
Give it a try, Ken. Post on social media or Chief Talk for us and let us know the answer.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah.
Scott, we have a question from Laura Engel. Hi, Laura.
Hello again. I know we're basically on framing for this kind of stuff, but I'm wondering from a materials list, if we did an addition like this and we're looking for the same polyline, can we do it for the interior also? Like if that was a bathroom, could we do it and that it would include the cabinets and all of the fixtures inside, not just the walls and the insulation?
Yeah, let me click undo a couple times here. Okay. Yeah, if we just kind of open up one of our views here and we look inside here, this is exactly what it is. It's a master bathroom, right, that we've added in here. We rotate around. And when you run your materials list, if we kind of peek back over and we scroll down, this is by category, right? So as we scroll down, here's our windows. We got a couple windows in there, and here's some of the cabinets. And remember, I do a polyline around it, so you're not going to probably get the larger cabinets that I had. Interior trim, and then here's the fixtures. So our tub filler that we have in there, there's a price already in there. And then the body sprays that come out of the shower, the rain head, the grab bars, the shower head. And you're getting each one of those from that materials list pie line. Let me close that view. And if you look at this in the 3D view, and we just kind of, let's just pick on this bathtub here. Let's click on it. Let's go in and look at him by double clicking. And we come down to the object information or components. Here's all the components that are making up this bathtub. So this is a Kohler Stargaze tub. And what I've done is I've actually saved this in my library, and when I reuse it, here's a rough price that you might expect to pay. And then of course there's the calculation if you wanted to add additional things and other components in here. So that's where that pricing's coming from, and you can always click on an object too and generate the materials list just for that object, which is basically the same thing we're just looking at in a different variation of that dialog. And if you wanted to isolate your materials list, let's go back to the one we originally generated. And you said, you know, I'm an interior person. I really don't care about framing. So what I might do is come in here and say, you know, I don't want any of the framing. So I want to come down and remove those items: roofing, framing, siding, subfloor, and let's just make sure I got the framing checked, and remove the framing and the foundation. So those things just aren't important to me as an interior person. And then when we rerun that filter, it's going to exclude those items out of the materials list. And now you're just looking at maybe something that's more relevant to you.
Okay.
Does that help?
It does. Thank you. Thank you. So then I apologize. Can you remind me again, if that is your focus, how you take that polyline?
Yeah, and if let's switch this view back over to, let me make sure I know what layer I put that on in the presentation here. So let's just make sure it's on the materials list layer. So let's switch this over to the kitchen and bath view. And we'll turn that layer on. So let's see where it's at, materials list. Let's turn it on. And so if I wanted to kind of make this and shape it around the bathroom, I'm just going to use a break tool, put a break in here. I'm going to shape it around the bathroom, make sure that I get those fixtures that I'm after. And we'll just pull it out so that we get that area. And you'd shape it. And then you could also open up this materials list pie line. And you could come in here and say, well, gosh, what do you want to exclude, right?
Yeah.
So you could come in here and say, you know, I don't want to have any of the general category in here. So you could remove it for all floors. You could also just say, you know, let's just do it for the main floor. So include all floors, like unchecked. And then you go through and remove the things that just aren't important to you.
Okay.
And then we regenerate it. So let's regenerate a new list. And then you're going to see, you know, I apparently didn't turn framing off, but we could easily turn that off. Go in here and just pop off the framing, just for one example. Now I'm getting just that list. And if you kind of come down here, you now see that I've got the larger cabinets. I've got countertop materials in here. And each one of those elements is being included, and then you can dial in exactly what you want out of this materials list.
Very cool. This is fabulous. Thank you.
You bet.
Scott, we have a question from John Trejidga. Sorry if I mispronounced your name.
Hey, John.
Hi. I wanted to say too that I've been an AutoCAD user when I first started in the industry since AutoCAD version 1.0 back in '82.
Oh,
and,
my.
Yeah, used it the architects in the office would laugh at that program I bought because they said it'll never go anywhere. So I had a friend using Chief Architect in 2010 told me I could learn how to use it in a weekend. So I wanted to prove him wrong. So I took a weekend to learn it and discovered this is an easy program to use. And not only that, I haven't looked back. I dropped AutoCAD and went full bore. Because I just love the 3D aspects and all the things we can do, especially in these remodel ones you're doing now, where you're showing the difference between as built, existing, and new. And I may have missed this from last week, but I was curious about the hatching aspect. You have shown it on a lower level where you've actually shown insulation, the actual symbol for insulation in the walls. And I was curious how you did that. And also, I think it's the floor below. And then how, yeah, there, in green, you've got two different colors, how you got that, two separate colors between new and existing.
Sure. Let's just take a look here and see what we have and look at it in 3D. So this is just the lower floor, right? And
Yes.
if you look at the way this floor is put together in here, some of these walls are just different. So you have a furred wall in here, and then you have an exterior wall here. And actually that exterior wall would be considered in our program a pony wall, because the upper part is stone and then the lower part has the foundation stem wall. And if we were just to open this wall up and you're asking, well, how is that different? And we look at the wall types, you can see that I have the hatching. This is an interior wall, sorry, an exterior wall with no interior. If you click on it, there's no interior sheetrock on here, because part of being accurate with your materials list is making sure, see there's no interior finish, is making sure your model's set up. So I built this wall type that didn't have in the interior finish on it. And then if you compare that to the other wall, let's grab this other wall that looks differently in the 2D. You can see the coloring is different. And the way that I did that is I just made a copy of the other wall, because this one also doesn't have interior finish on it. And underneath the define button, I just clicked on the fill style that you would see in the 2D view. And when you click on this fill style, you can kind of choose whatever you want for that.
I see. You used hexagon. I was wondering how you got that symbol.
Yeah.
I couldn't feel visually. You cheated and you used hexagon to get the.
Sometimes if cheating works, then cheating works.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I was wondering what you.
Of course, there's a library of fill styles. If you went out and found the fill patterns, there's a bunch of different fill patterns that you can choose from, and
but no insulation.
Yeah, I may have to cheat and find something.
Not the kind that you created using the hexagon.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so you can maybe find something looks similar, and there's a library, but that's how I did that. And then in the 2D view, you're kind of looking at the difference, and I just did that for color coding. And then, you know, of course, when you generate your wall legend, if I were to open up my wall legend, most of those walls should just show up underneath the wall legend, and you can see the color coding of them.
Yes, perfect.
And that's just a schedule, right? Underneath your schedules, tools, schedules, wall schedule is what that is. And then you can include or exclude walls if you don't want any of the as-built walls.
Excellent. Good. I appreciate it. That's very helpful.
All right, John, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Scott, George Pinto has a question. Go ahead and ask your question.
Hello. I have 3 very short questions. First one is, if I'm doing a remodel, I have my as-built, meaning my existing building or structure, right? I draw that up. You know, it's all my layers, whatever. Then I come to add my addition. When I do my addition, I use different layers and colors. In terms of getting the materials list for the addition, I know you did the polyline material region, polyline, and you selected it. But if that polyline catches like the exterior wall or some of the existing as-built structure, is there a way that I could just generate a materials list based on a layer that I've created called remodel? That way, let's say I'm adding a hip or a gable roof, you know, if I'm not having to cut into the roof, I'm just putting like some nailer plates, my rich and all that, not picking up the roofing under it or the material under it. Does that make sense?
Well, one thing, and then I'll probably ask Al to jump in here since he probably is more familiar with that, is you could take any of, if I've kind of got a diagram up here on my screen, when you create your as-built, you save it as a remodel. And when you generate, let's say, the roof for your new remodel project, and you only want the materials list for that, you could remove the as-built roof. And you know, when I was kind of getting ready for the presentation here, one of the things that I did is I kind of did the inverse of the process. Let me just grab this real quick. Where is that? See if I have it. So I kind of did the inverse of this, where I only framed and I got rid of the as-built framing, and I only did the remodel framing. So I kind of did the inverse of what I did in the presentation here. So if you removed your roof from the as-built, then run the materials list, you're not going to get the materials list for anything that wouldn't be new. You can set up layers, and there is a way to generate the materials list from layers. We may be going away from that in the future. I'm not usually one to encourage that, but you can approach it. But maybe consider just removing your roof off of your as-built if you want just the materials for the new roof. Al, would you add anything with that?
Yeah, if you're designating specific layers for the remodels aspect, if you go into the standard layer table, your display options dialog, you can remove the materials from the essentially from all the as-built stuff. See a list for materials. So take a look at that.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So
Now,
if you're splitting the layers out, you can take advantage of that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. That's good.
Again, I would just caution you, that may be something that we may not, that gets more involved, and controlling your materials list through layers may not be an indefinite solution. We're trying to improve the way that is. But as Al points out, you can choose that today. You notice that I have the materials list out of the regular windows. I created a new layer for Windows Remodel, and the materials list column is checked with the M inside of that column.
Okay, great. Thank you. Rebar. Is rebar always going to be just a polyline thing, or is there a way to generate rebar actually with the foundation?
If I grab this wall and I just do the materials list for this wall, it's going to give you an approximate calculation for your rebar. You may do that based on lineal feet of your wall. Plus, this is a step foundation, maybe more complicated. And each one of those walls, if you look at the detail inside of the component code, if we went over to components and you look at how is that being calculated, here's your rebar for horizontal and vertical, and then you have the formula and access to control that inside of the dialog in here. And that's a stepped wall, so that's a little bit more complicated, right? But yes, you can control that in the wall dialog and components specifically right here.
Okay, but there's no way to like show it if you're like on the slab, like showing your.
Not unless I draw it as a separate 3D object, yeah. And you could do that. You could just draw a small symbol object and then put it in there, and then use an array copy or multiple copy and show it if that's important to you.
Well, it's important to foundations, and if you're trying to price everything, so I don't know, maybe that could be like a feature request for some years down the line.
Sure. Okay. Thanks a lot for calling in, George.
We have a question from Cynthia Walden. Go ahead, Cynthia.
Hi, yeah, just a question on the material list. This kind of goes back to the woman that I was asking about the interior materials. Yes. So, I mean, frequently my client is selecting fixtures that aren't included in your library, but an easy way to update them would be in the material list rather than going to each individual component. So is it possible to change like the brand and model number from in the material list, or do I have to go back to the individual fixture and modify the specifications for that? Does that make sense?
Yeah, let's take a look. I may have used just a generic shower head in here. I'm not sure. When I select that shower head, let's see what I've got in here. And we come over here. No, that's apparently I think it's a Kohler unit. Yeah. So you wanted to change it. Maybe I use it a non-branded one here. You wanted to change it.
Well, I was just wondering because it would be easier because I pick stuff from your library that's got a similar look to what the client might pick. But then it would be easier to just go on the material list where you have all your fixtures listed and just go line item and change the manufacturer, change the description and model number, rather than going back and forth into the plan and opening up objects.
Sure. And let's just take a look. Let's generate it just for fixtures. So let's click on this guy. Let's open up a new materials list. Let's come down to the fixture category. So you want to go line item by line item. And if we come down here, here's a urinal, right?
Right. And if you
it's not branded, it doesn't look like. Let's give it a little more screen.
It's got a Toto manufacturer, so
yeah. So if you wanted to change this specifically, right? And you just said Toto, right? And then came over and put the price in. You could come over here, put the price in. And then, I mean, you could do it right in here, or you can also push this out to Excel once you have it, and then modify it that way. If you want it to look slightly different, that's an option as well.
Okay, so all the fields, the manufacturer field and the size, this is all editable. If I change the size, will it change it on the drawing?
Oh, yeah. So notice that it may have the size in here, and I could probably come in here and call it, let's call it a 22-inch. That's going to have no effect on the actual plan that I have. So that's still going to remain at the dimensions separately. But you can always click. Remember, if I'm on this urinal, you can always open this up directly in the plan, right? It points you to it. And then one of the easiest things to do is just open that up and maybe just go in here and modify it directly. And you also then have the ability to change the dimensions right here. So if you wanted to modify it, then you could get both. And then when you generate your materials list, it's accurate in both the plan view, elevation view, and your materials list.
Okay.
Because all of that setting for your calculations is available down here underneath the components.
Okay.
Hey Scott, this is Adrienne.
Yeah.
Have you been able to show the find object and plan feature in the materials list?
I think that's what I just did right there.
Oh, okay.
Go back to the materials list, and of course I've got a bunch of them open now. And here we were. And again, you click on the unit, you click find in plan, which is in the far bottom left-hand corner, and then that pops it open right directly to that object. That's a very handy feature.
Scott, we have a question from G. Ziali. Go ahead.
Hello, George here. Can you hear me?
George.
Right? Hi there. Scott, well done for such a brilliant campaign you're embarking on to educate the masses on the intricacies of the software. It's absolutely amazing. I've been using Home Designer for about 12 years, and recently I made the switch to Premiere X12. My biggest regret is that your sales guys should have made me an offer I couldn't refuse 5 years ago. Anyway, a slightly unrelated question, if I may. I noticed an option under the CAD menu called something like footprint.
Plan footprint.
And when we're preparing applications, for the permits, planning applications, we need to show what is the footprint of the existing property and what is the footprint of the proposed.
Okay.
In some applications, we even need to work out the volume of the structure.
Okay.
So the question I have for you, is it possible to calculate the volume, maybe even using Ruby if necessary?
So you want to calculate the site plan that you're removing the amount of volume of the earth out of to make.
No, the volume of the building. Purely the volume of the building.
Are you able, George, are you able to see my screen with this example?
I am, yes.
Remodel project?
Yes.
So that item that you talked about in the CAD menu, plan footprint, it will generate a footprint and you can use it. In this example, what I've done here is I've just drawn a CAD box over the top of the new remodel condition. And I kind of did something pretty similar to this with the plan that we were working on just for the bathroom. If we kind of go back here, let me switch over to where that view is. So you see this blue shading that I have?
Yep, yep.
And what I did here was I drew a CAD box over the top of the new addition area. And if I click on this box, you see off to the side, it has a label, expanded master, 192 square feet.
Yes.
And I let the program calculate that for me. Of course, depending on where you are running the calculation, some people do it in the inside or the outside, right? And underneath of the label panel in this, you can see what I did is expanded master. So there's the text, and then there's an option down at the bottom that says % area. And that's a macro that you have access to underneath of your macros. And you're going to find that, you know, that particular macro that I used was the area.
Yep.
And so when you have that set up, which was pretty similar to this larger plan that I did here, that's really kind of how I did that, is I controlled and just drew a box right over the top of the new footprint that was being added to the project, the new addition.
Yeah.
That's how I was able to generate that. And it's just kind of a simple CAD box. And then, you know, each one of these you can put on a layer. And my layer for the label is kind of gray. I look at that. And then also I made the text size. I used the same text size as a room label, so it matched what the master bath is. But you can make that any size you want. Is that
yes? I mean, generating
what you're after?
No, not really. Generating the floor, the plan area is okay. Yeah. We can do that quite easily.
Okay.
It's generating the volume that the building occupies. How many cubic meters?
Oh, yeah. Well,
because in some planning situations, you're only allowed to increase the volume of a building. Say I demolish my old house and I want to build a new one. You can only increase it by 30%.
Okay.
So if the building is fairly straightforward, you can do that on the back of a piece of paper, no problem. But many buildings, especially the historic buildings, are very complicated in shape. And I've had to go back to using SketchUp to remodel the building, just using plain lines, you know, nothing fancy. And then use SketchUp's built-in tools to calculate the volume of the building. And I don't think it's a great step for your programmers to devise some kind of formula to do that.
So you basically want to be able to take this structure here, and if I just switch this to the wireframe, and take this area right here, convert that into a symbol, and then figure out, well, what percentage increases this over the previous structure.
The previous one, yes.
Okay.
Measured from the terrain model.
Yeah. I'll make sure that that feature request is made. I'll maybe pause here and let Al jump in, but I don't know that we have a quick tool to do that today. But Al, is there anything you might want to add here?
Isn't there a macro for room volume?
Chris, is there a macro for room volume that you're aware of?
I'm fairly sure we do have a room volume macro. In fact, we may have more than one. But yeah, best way to check is to just take a look at what shows up in your macros list.
It doesn't have to be very accurate. By that, I mean, you can ignore the roof overhang, for example. Just a simplified layout, just to calculate the volume of the building.
Yeah. Well, I'll make sure we'll make sure, George, that we make a note of that, because that sounds I understand what you're asking for. Yeah.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thanks a lot for calling in.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
First of all, I appreciate everybody showing up. Remember, the free webinars that we have are every Thursday. If we take a look at our list of learning resources, And next week, what we're going to be working on is really the master bath floor plan process. We're going to take a look. Some of you trace over, you may have an existing plan that a client has, PDF or an image. We're going to talk about what's an easy way to trace over that and how to dimension. So that'll be next Thursday at same time, noon Pacific time. And if we just open up our website here, that's the next class. And then the way you get to our live webinars from our main website, come down, click on the live webinar system, and then we can scroll down. Master Baths next week. We have a boot camp next Friday. If you're new to Chief Architect, we have a session that will be next Friday. And then as we continue on, our focus for August is Master Bath. We're going to be looking at cabinets and vanities and really kind of how cabinets work, and then converting that to a wall elevation. And then we're going to be focusing and drilling in on showers the following week, and then so on and so forth through the end of the month with master closets. The first week in September will be another training class. They're great ways to learn how to use the program, on-demand training classes, and then one-on-one is really kind of personalized training. It's a great resource for you. I wanted to thank everybody for coming today, and with that, see you next Thursday, same time, same place.